Next, we have Ms. Kurtz or Ms. Gonzalez will be providing a presentation regarding the Schertz Emerging Leaders Program. Ms. Gonzalez?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And also Jessica Kurz will be co-presenting too. So, okay. All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Just want to start this off by saying last year, I think it was, Dr. Brown approached me and said that he would like to look into possibly developing a leadership development program for our employees. But with COVID and everything, it just kind of got pushed aside. So again, this year, he was like, okay, how about we start looking into this? And so I was working closely with Lindsay when she was here, and now Jessica, to put this program together. Didn't really quite know what it was going to encompass and entail, but we are excited to be able to have it launching in the new year. So we just wanted to come forward and provide you guys with some information on it and what we're going to be able to do. Okay. So first, just a brief information about the program overview. So it's going to be an 8-month curriculum of leadership development. We are going to kick the program off in January, and it'll meet once a month, and it will go through August. And then for the participants that complete the program, which will hopefully be everybody, but we will bring them in September and do a presentation at council. It is going to be facilitated by Strategic Government Resources, and the topics and concepts that we will be discussing will be related to leadership, trust, effective communication, conflict resolution, emotional intelligence, and more. We are excited to offer a mentorship component to this program. I have in there it's structured and formal, and what that means is that each participant is going to be paired with a leader in the city, and so we're going to be doing mentor training as well so that everyone has the same experience coming out of it. Each participant will be able to say that they, received the same guidance and, mentorship from who they were paired with. So, Jessica?
To take over here. As Sarah said, so we'll be meeting once a month. SGR will be coming on site and facilitating about a half-day workshop for the participants. We'll be in person. The curriculum does include both pre- and post-session assignments, so there will be reading and other work that the participants will be engaged in outside of just the 4-hour workshop. That may include, like I said, book readings, and then, as Sarah mentioned, meetings with the mentors. So there will be formal time for the participants and the mentors to meet, but there may be also times informally where those pairs are getting together outside of the workshop as well. One of the things that we wanted to include, just in kind of a disclaimer that we put out there, was that participation in this course doesn't necessarily result in a monetary increase to those participants or a guarantee of a promotion, but what it does offer them is the opportunity to develop their skills, and so that they can ready themselves for when positions come available. They'll be ready hopefully to step in. So this is really a great succession planning tool, and we're really excited. I've heard from several employees who are just, there's a lot of buzz about this. They're really excited. I think this is just a really awesome thing that the city is taking on.
And so we did want, whenever we were talking about this, and we were like, okay, what kind of parameters do we want to put on for those folks who would be eligible to apply for this? So 3 separate things. Of course, they must be in good standing with the city. What we really wanted to do was target it at employees that were at manager level and below, so not department heads or assistant department heads. We wanted to target maybe some boots on the ground folks, some frontline office staff, and manager level, and everyone kind of in between that. And then, of course, the last thing on there is what we felt was important was of course, we want an employee that has been with the city for at least 1 continuous year. And, so that way, at that point, they kind of have their role of their job and where they fit in with the city and the organization as well.
So the selection process, we did receive 30 applications, and as Sarah mentioned, they ranged across the city, all departments, all different levels, and so unfortunately, we did have to limit participation in the program. This is our inaugural year, so it's going to be kind of a learning year for us as well, and in consultation with SGR, they really recommended that we limit it so that we can maximize what the participants can get out of the program. So we did limit it to 10. The applications did include a 200-word essay on just why they were wanting to participate and what they hoped to take away from the program. And so those essays were evaluated anonymously, meaning we removed the names. And so they were just evaluated on content. And then we did also group the essays, as you can see here, by job level. And what that means is, because we wanted to have a good representation across the city, all different levels, we did group them into frontline office staff, frontline field staff, and then supervisors. So again, we could make sure that we had a good sampling of folks. And so that's how the participants were selected. And so
and so the participants have been notified. As Jessica said, we have selected 10 employees, and we are working on pairing the mentors with the participants, and we'll notify and let folks know about those pairings. As I mentioned, we are going to have a dedicated mentor training at the beginning of January, and then we're excited to kick the program off on January 19th. And last but not least, congratulations to our inaugural class. Again, as you can see, everybody up there, it's a good representation of all levels of the organization and also from all departments as well. So be happy to answer any questions you may have, but we are looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I'm just looking at the names, and we're well represented just about in all our different departments. That's great. Council, questions? Yes, Councilmember Scott.
Yes, thank you. What is SGR an acronym for?
Strategic Government Resources.
Okay.
They're a consulting firm in Dallas with expertise in this area. They do a lot of hiring for cities, but they also branch out in a lot of other HR areas. They've actually worked with several cities in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that had experience. So they've got experience running these kinds of programs, and we felt like we needed that kind of expertise. So they're well qualified.
That's excellent. I'm a big fan of this program. I believe in leadership development, and I applaud you on that. For my only other question, I understand that the 200-word essay, and then I read that the participants were selected, but you said they selected them. So was SGR part of the committee who selected them, or how did the selection process happen after the names were removed and you had your applicants in front of you? What was that process?
Okay, so no, SGR did not do the participant selection. That was actually, we had folks from the city management office review the applications separately, and then we collected those, and based on the score sheets, tabulated them, averaged them out, and did just the rank, put them in order by score, and then, developed the cut line for the different groups that we had. So it was judged internally.
Okay, so
Charles Bryan and I were the evaluators, and we assigned grades of 1 to 10.
yeah,
for each
that
of
makes
them.
a lot of sense. And I have to echo what the mayor said about having a good cross-section. I was pleased to see that it was representative of the various departments across the city. But anyway, good job. I look forward to your presentation.
Thank you.
Also, any other comments? Thank you.
Let me just say, Mayor, I want to thank Sarah and Jessica both for the great work that they've done on this. And truly, when we started, we really didn't have a direction, and they, Sarah especially, decided how to get in contact with the experts, and we looked at a lot of different possibilities. This program wasn't just handed to us. We had to construct it the way we wanted it to look, and so I'm really excited about the opportunity to do this, and we look forward to to really strengthening our staff in the future.
Mayor, one more thing.
Yes.
I think, following on the heels of that, I think it speaks volumes about you wanting to put back into the employee talent pool. I think that's really important. And when I was in the corporate sector, we had something like this. There's a lot of competition for it. It is a big deal. There's a perceived prestige and value that's for real, and everybody who, the cream will rise, and people want to be on board with this. So I think it's fantastic.
We were pleasantly surprised with the response that we got from staff. So we're very excited and excited to be able to take the program. And again, it is our first year, so I'm sure we'll have some learning lessons as well. But kind of make it our own. And so excited. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll continue with city events and announcements. Announcements of upcoming events. Mr. James?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a reminder, our next council meeting will be next week, Tuesday, December 14th at 6 o'clock here in council chambers. Tuesday, December 14th as well, earlier in the day, we'll have Breakfast with the Blue. That's from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. at Jalisco's on FM 3009. And then Friday, December 17th, we're doing the Blue Santa program, or the police department is, 4 to 6 p.m. That's in the community center.
Okay, announcements and recognitions by our city manager, Dr. Brown.
Yeah, so we had our Holodazzle and Festival of Angels parade. I just wanted to pass out thanks to our folks, particularly in the Parks Department, Lauren Schrum and her staff, Jared Montney, Mary Spence, and Michelle Yang, especially all were instrumental in putting that program together, and want to thank them. Also, we had many departments involved, including police, Public Works, Animal Care Services, Public Affairs, the Fire Department, Neighborhood Services, our Civic Center staff, our EMS, and then also we wanted to thank our community volunteers for the great work. I think it was a big success.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Announcements and recognitions by the mayor. I want to echo on that. You know, it's more than just Parks and Recreation. It's all city staff was involved in this, and also volunteers. These events can only happen with everybody that participates, and this year it was well done. Thank you. Thank you to the staff. We'll move on to the hearing of residents. This time is set aside for any person who wishes to address the city council. Each person is limited to 3 minutes, and we ask before addressing the council, for the record, please state your name and address. Mayor Pro Tem, please call our first speaker.
First speaker this evening is Douglas Becker.
Greetings, Mayor and Council. My name is Douglas Becker. I live at 9410 Aranda Lane in Schertz, Texas. And is that enough? All right. Anyway, I'm here saying that we've been out there longer than Schertz has been. And we were part of Converse at one time, and we moved out there because Converse was on the other side of the runway, and the city would never come get us. But they switched it now that Schertz and Converse traded out some land, and we ended up in Schertz. And we all pay taxes out there, and we all pay sewer taxes, and we have no sewers. None of us on the Aranda Lane have sewers, and the Roundup doesn't have sewers. There's a lot of places right there that need sewers. Now, the lots are 3 acres deep. So, the sewer line, I watched it as they laid it across the street from Aranda, and they butted it right up against a 20-inch water line. So that's dead that way, and it's real shallow. So to be able to go and put a sewer line in that would handle the back of those 3-acre lots, you're gonna have to have a deep line, and you're gonna have to have a lift station. And anyway, I've talked to everybody out there, and they all say, we've been paying sewer tax for the longest. We don't know why. But anyway, they would like to have sewers, the ones that I've talked to. And that's all I have to say, Council.
Thank you, sir.
All right, next up is Daniel Jameson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. And first off, I want to thank y'all for the parade y'all did for my parents back in July for their anniversary and birthday and everything else. That was a memorable event for my parents. They enjoyed it. And then again, you know, coming up into Veterans Day festivities, and my dad was really honored because of the fact that, you know, serving in Vietnam, this was his birthday, so to speak, to come home and to be home for the real current generation. And the family was actually got pictured in the magazine. So autographs are available at the end of the meeting. And there is a small fee. And then, of course, Saturday night's parade, Mom heard about the parade and she said, I want to go, and she had a good time. I was able to get pictures of her and Dad just waving at the people coming by. I enjoyed seeing the mayor and Pro Tem walking the trek from the park down to here. So once again, thank y'all for your concern about enjoying and employing the city. And I enjoy working with Charles to get some other issues resolved in the city. And the sewer line that the other gentleman was talking about in front of the high school, that's a well-needed adventure and probably even long overdue. And I know there's other places here in the city that need that too. So continue keeping up the good work that y'all are doing for the city. And if I can be available and help any place, give me a call. Most of them have my number. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, next up is Maggie Titterington.
Good evening, Council. I'm going to echo before I hit my 2 items that I was going to talk about. The tree lighting ceremony to kick everything off was just fabulous. My husband is a transplant from Boston and is used to small town happenings and things that he used to celebrate, but he says the warmth and just the traditions, he says he loves, just even more so than his hometown, loves Schertz, loves the people, and I like the enhancements that you made to the tree, the presents and everything, but yes, I totally agree. It was a wonderful event. My volunteer committees had great time with my staff on Saturday at the parade, and yes, thank you to all those that put so much hard work and time into it. It is very much appreciated, not as just a fellow person who helps businesses, but also as a resident. I really, really enjoy those traditions. It's very special and important. So now down to business. 2 items on the agenda tonight. Agenda item 10, very much in support of, I know it's just a public hearing, but very much in support for Crossvine to be able to get this rezoning. I know that they had to, from my understanding in the past, when they originally were doing the design, had to do a workaround for these 2.5 acres, and so I'm very pleased that they're able to have acquired them, and so in order to just rezone it so it can be put back into the total master plan, I certainly hope that council will support that. It does make sense, but I know Chris is here, but I'm very excited for him. And then also on the workshop for number 11, I know that this has been a long time in the making. There's been a lot of shareholder meetings about changes, updates, and ordinances, and of course near and dear to my heart is that tree mitigation that I know is going to be coming up. I know I was there for one of the presentations about the suggestion, direction from council to Mr. James about how to go on that, and I believe that now there is a point of presenting it to you all, a suggestion. It's very thrilling because there's so many businesses within the chamber that have come to us and expressed a bit of dismay at the costs and about the whole situation about what to do. They want to build here, they love our city, but just the exorbitant fees. And so thank you, Mr. James and his team, and also planning and zoning for coming up with this compromise that I really hope will be pushed through, and I guess it won't be adopted until January if you all approve the way it is, but just know a lot of businesses are holding their breath right now, and that I just thank you so much for listening to us and listening to them and coming up with this compromise. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, last up this evening is Glenn Outlaw.
Good evening, all. Glenn Outlaw, 3729 Forsyth Park here in Schertz. It's been a while since I've been here in person. I have been watching at home, though, and I think that's a great option for people to participate. I wanted to come down tonight and share some positive feedback about the police department. I was on my way to the dog park the other day, and as I'm coming down Schertz Parkway, our Savannah Drive towards Schertz Parkway, I noticed a motorcycle officer doing a traffic stop. I assumed it was one of the constables. Pleasantly surprised to find out it was a Schertz officer that we now have gone back to a motor officer. And then a couple days later, I'm not sure what I was doing, but it was was on my way home, and I happened to see 2 patrol officers doing 2 different traffic stops. Something I've commented before, not to you folks, but to some other people, about how it'd been a long time since I'd seen a Schertz traffic stop. And I just want to, you know, talking to a couple of the officers, I understand that staffing has improved, and they've gotten through, you know, some shortages to where they've got a little more time on their hand now. And that's been one of, you know, traffic enforcement's been one of my concerns as a resident. I'm tired of getting run over on Schertz Parkway. I'm tired of getting run over on 3009. And I understand that may not be the highest priority when it comes to law enforcement, but it's nice that the department has found itself back in a position to where they can at least make some effort. And I would just like to encourage council, as you, because it won't be long. I know, Dr. Brown, that the next budget cycle is going to crank up here not too long. I'd like to encourage you to think about asking the police department and seeing if we couldn't fund a few more officers. You know, growing up in the fire departments are real easy. You want a new fire station, that's 12 guys. It's pretty cut and dried. Law enforcement, you know, police department's not quite that easy. And it's, you know, I've seen council on 2 occasions now bite off the manpower for a new fire station, and typically you phase it in over a number of years to ease the budget pain. And just consider that that might be a way to maybe boost police staffing, you know, maybe 2 or 3 a year for a while. I'm not going to speak for Chief Bain. I'm sure, you know, he knows what his manpower needs are, but I just want to thank him and for, you know, coming back, and something that's near and dear to my heart as somebody that drives the streets quite a bit. And thank council for their support, and encourage you to support them just a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atla. All right. I believe that's the last one, right? Yes. Okay. We'll move on to consent agenda items. They are considered self-explanatory, and information packets are provided to council and available for public viewing. These items require no separate discussion unless requested by council. Item number 1, approval of the minutes of our meeting November 9th, 2021, and the minutes of our special meeting on November 15th, 2021. Item number 2, resolution number 21R129, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a contract with Texas Sterling Construction Company relating to the Tri-County Parkway project and authorizing the budget expenditures for the project. Item number 3, resolution number 21R124, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a contract with Fouquet Incorporated related to the 2020 Fog Seal project and authorizing the budget expenditures for the project. Mayor Pro Temp, will you please read the following consent items?
Item number 4, Resolution 21-R-128, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, approving a budget amendment to the Schertz-Seguin Local Government Corporation fiscal year 21-22 annual budget in the amount of $122,000 as a transfer to the SSLGC Future Development Fund and other matters in connection therewith. Item number 5, ordinance number 21-F-47, a ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, amending Chapter 90 of the Code of Ordinances, Article 5, Water and Wastewater Capital Recovery Fees, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance and providing a effective date. Final reading. Item number 6, ordinance number 21-T-48, a ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing an adjustment to the fiscal year 21-22 budget to provide additional funding for the Tri-County Parkway project construction phase, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance and providing an effective date. Final reading. Item number 7, appointments and resignations to the various city boards, commissions, and committees, approving the appointment of Ms. Judy Goldick as a regular member the appointment of Mr. Hector Roderick as an alternate member to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the appointment of Mr. James Brad Snow to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Council, do any of these need to be removed for separate discussion? Yes, Councilmember Scott?
Number 2, please, Resolution 21-R-129.
Okay, number 2. Council, any others? Okay. Ms. Edmondson, pulling 2 does not necessarily pull 6 out, am I correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Just pulling 2, you can leave 6 under consent.
All right. So do I have a motion to approve items number 1 and 3 through 7?
So moved.
Moved.
Okay. Have a motion made by Councilmember Whitaker, second by Councilmember Scott. Any other discussions? Let's go ahead and call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
We have 7 ayes, no objection, motion passes. Let's go back to item number 2. And the reason I mentioned number 6 is because they're semi-related. 2 and 6 are related. So item number 2 is resolution number 21R129, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a contract with Texas Sterling Construction Company related to the Tri-County Parkway project and authorizing the budget expenditures for the project. All right. Let's see, Mr. James, Ms. Woodley. Okay, Councilmember Scott, you had questions on this one?
Bailing on me and leaving me to talk to y'all. Figures I'll out-talk you on this one, so we'll see. We'll tag team.
Okay.
So what we've got, the item for us is the Tri-County Parkway construction contract that we've been coming back, that we put in design, went out to bid, like many of the other items on the agenda in the last couple agendas. Price is higher than we had hoped for. We're still planning to proceed ahead with it, though.
Yes, my question wasn't on the price, it was on the company itself, and I apologize. I try to the very best of my ability, read every word on the attachment. Sometimes there's 600 pages, and so I'm sorry. I'm not making excuses, I'm just letting
No,
you
that's
know.
okay. No, yeah.
Yeah, so what caught my eye was on page 53, has the firm ever failed to complete a contract? Construction, no. Again, on 53, has any corporate officer, partner, joint venture participant, or proprietor ever failed to complete a construction contract? No. But on page 54, are there any judgment, claims, disputes, or litigation pending or outstanding? And I'm seeing that there's 6. And I'm not an industry person. As far as this industry goes, this is not my industry, my background, or my forte. I need more information so I can make the best informed decision. Is this standard? Is it normal? Is it high? Is it low? Let's have some judgment from your experience, if you please.
Sure. I'll let us both sort of chime in. Again, we'd prefer they didn't have that, but it's not uncommon that folks get into a situation, get into an issue with judgment or litigation or things like that necessarily. It happens, frankly. So would we prefer they didn't have that? Yeah, we'd prefer they didn't have it, but it's not uncommon necessarily, particularly for big companies that do a lot of work. They just at times have projects where they come across with somebody, but chime in with your thoughts, John.
That is correct. It's not uncommon, particularly in the construction industry, to have something going on. But our consultant did research what was going on with the company. That we did check references. We did look at other performance and things on similar type projects, and they did ultimately recommend award of Texas Sterling for this project. They feel it's something that's right in their wheelhouse that they can get accomplished.
Okay. I appreciate that. It's just that some things that we've done in the past, like with the, for example, the animal shelter, that we're still trying to deal with some of that. So I just wanted to know if that ballpark was acceptable. Obviously, it was an acceptable risk. I did see their 3 references they listed. They were from TxDOT, Bexar County, and City of San Antonio. So I'm not questioning their major players. I'm just seeing if you think it's a good risk.
Good catch. I mean, again, I think as John said, would we rather they didn't have any? Sure. But at times, particularly with companies that do a lot of work, they have stuff that goes wrong on some of them, so you kind of look on whole, what's their track record of performing? And certainly for other governmental entities in the area, that helps.
All righty. Thank you for that information. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, council, any other comments? Is there a motion to approve resolution number 21R129?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Whitaker, second by Councilmember Hayward. Excuse me. Any other comments? Let's go ahead and call for the vote.
Aye.
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 We have 7 ayes, no objection, motion passes. All right, we'll move on to item number 8. Ordinance number 21T50, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing an adjustment to the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, and providing an effective date. Mr. Walters, you have the floor.
Good evening. My name is James Walters. I'm the Finance Director for the City of Schertz. Tonight we have a budget adjustment before you. There's 2 parts to it. The first part is the Re-Encumbrance Ordinance. So it's a list of projects and expenses that the city had budgeted for and were authorized for in the previous fiscal year that for various reasons we did not get to execute fully. So this is funds that were authorized and budgeted. When we close out the fiscal year, since we didn't make those expenses, they go into fund balance. So during this year, we would like council to take that money out of fund balance, reallocate it basically, so we can finish the projects we started last year without impeding any ongoing projects or new projects that we have for 2021-2022. So the total for that is $1.2 million. I'll go through each of the items real quickly. The first one is the Planning and Zoning Division. It's $401,000, all related to the master plan and the senior planner position. I don't believe we ever managed to hire the senior planner who was supposed to oversee the project. Excuse me. So that project has not fully kicked off, and we haven't recognized any expenses for that project. We have the Public Affairs, $16,000 for the Citizen Satisfaction Survey. Due to COVID, we waited a year. I actually believe we have that out now in the current fiscal year, so that's something we went ahead with. The engineering, $13,115. A couple of studies, the stormwater control inventory and the lift station design. The library, to utilize some donated funds for this year. The fleet for ProCare supplies, damaged equipment on the parks vehicle. Fires by $36,000 for back-ordered supplies. Everything's very short supply chain. I'll throw that out there. The streets by $111,000. That's $51,000 for FM 78 maintenance and $61,000 for the Aviation Heights Sidewalk Project Phase 2. Facilities maintenance, $182,000. $45,000 for the completion of the animal adoption gate and fence, and $137,000 for corrective projects like the City Hall counter remodel. There's a lot of turnover in the maintenance manager this last year, so some of the projects were able to move forward to a point where we could hire a contractor and start making those payments. On the water and sewer budget, $91,000, $73,000 for the sewer system camera for inspecting sewer mains, and $18,000 for a leak detection system. Both of those are high-dollar purchases that just delayed getting them in. Increased the EMS budget, $359,000. $300,000, just under $300,000 is for an ambulance. They take a long time to construct. We now have ambulances every year, as well as $34,000 for, again, supply delays, flu vaccines, safety vests, uniforms. And then the hotel occupancy tax by $44,888 for the new banquet chairs that we actually did a budget adjustment for last year, that we thought the delivery time was 4 weeks, it not be 6 weeks, and I think it's going even longer, but those should be in soon. I have one other one I wanted to touch on. We got that one in late. It was a request from Parks. They have another $135,000 that was not listed on here. We'll include it on the second reading. They have $28,000 for Wendy Swan Memorial Park restroom repairs due to the winter storm. That's next on their list. We actually have money from that from our insurance that came in. We didn't get a chance to get to that project, so that's not even city's budgeted money, that's actually from the insurance. And then we have $102,997 for Ashley Park Improvements Phase 3. Council authorized that project at $110,000. So the remaining $8,000 will come from the 2022 existing budget. As Parks would like to move forward with that project in addition to what they have planned for this year. The final piece of this is a budget adjustment for the new, it was actually for the new Quint for Fire Station 4. The voter approved the bonds for the 4th fire station. Part of that included a firing apparatus. Fire staff would like to move forward with the contract purchase. In the end, this will not affect the general fund balance. The general fund will front the money. We hope to get the purchase and contract signed before the end of December. If we do, we'll save about $80,000 on price increases that'll hit in January. That's the reason we're bringing this one forward instead of waiting for us to issue bonds at a later date. If this goes forward, we'll bring a resolution to council next time, reimbursement resolution. So when we actually issue those bonds at the end of 2022, the city will pay itself back. So this is just fronting $1.2 million, $1.3 million. The general fund will get all of that back by the end of the year.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. The council, floor is open for discussion. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Dalla.
On pre-ordering the Quint, I mean, obviously that makes a lot of sense. The question is, what is the delivery time on that, and where are we going to keep it until the fire station's built?
It's about 13 months, so we wouldn't probably get it until January of 2023. Fire Station 4 won't be on the ground yet, off the ground yet, but we'll probably station it at, I believe, Station 3? One. That was 3. Yeah, that was...
I had 3 choices.
That was one of 3. 33% chance.
It'll be buildings 27.
I know I can't fit it 2, so that one's out.
Okay, council, any other comments?
I was just going to suggest we could probably take Chief Cade's vehicle and leave it outside and park it in there.
Councilmember Scott.
Was this in the package, or is this just information you're telling us?
This is an ordinance in the package.
For the P&Z, did you say 401,000?
Yes, they had the...
2 positions?
No, it was the master plan, the master plan update.
It's for the comp plan. It's for the comp plan.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, council, any other comments? Is there a motion to approve ordinance number 21T50?
So moved.
Do I have a second? We have a motion by Councilmember Brown, second by Councilmember Davis. Any other comments? Let's go ahead and call for the vote.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
We have 7 ayes, no objection, motion passes. Thank you. Next, item number 9 is a public hearing, ordinance number 21S49, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, replacing section 21.15.4 of the Code of Ordinances, Article 15, Easements and Utilities, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance and providing an effective date. This is also our first reading. Ms. Williams, the floor is yours.
So, Mayor, if you mind, if you wouldn't mind, I'd just like to introduce this before Suzanne gets started. And this was an effort, a pretty big effort by the entire staff to try to revise this ordinance. It was before, it's basically been a 1-paragraph, and it's sort of subject to open to interpretation. We interpret it differently by different people. It's not easy to understand. The waiver provision is not well worded. So the whole staff sort of undertook this to try to revise it. It's now about 4 pages, and it's very thorough. And the staff, I think, did a good job in looking at all of these things. But what I would like to say to you is that this is a complex issue. This is not a pro forma discussion by any means. And if we come to the end of this discussion, we decide that this is not ready, then we'll take it back. So it does not have to be passed tonight. But we wanted to get your input and your thoughts on it so that we understand the direction, because what it really has to do with is is utility poles and when they go underground, where they go underground, and how do we waive that if we decide that we want to give waivers? So I would just offer that as introduction, and then we'll turn it over to Suzanne. She'll give the presentation.
Thank you. I'm Suzanne Williams, the Director of Public Works for City of Schertz. Thank you, Dr. Brown, for that introduction. And we bring to you, it's Article 15 in the UDC. And the reason we want to clarify it is, as Dr. Brown said, right now it's a few sentences. It's a small paragraph. You saw that in your packet. This update would provide us with some clarity, so we have some unified placement for private and public utilities. What has happened is because that the current ordinance has so few language, and I'm going to go into what it actually says, that it hasn't allowed us the ability to look at different scenarios with development, because not all the scenarios fit under the current language. So what has historically happened is that we have managed that utility development by basically a waiver, because it just simply didn't fit. So this is going into a policy discussion. It is going to be a bit different, but it's to basically shape the vision of Schertz, what you want. Because what's happening right now is the development is actually shaping it. And we'd like to be able to know what the vision is, and then this language, we believe, would give us the tools to get there. And so at the very end, we'd like your direction and your input, please. So the current requirements, and this is really what it is that utilities should be located in the front yard, installed underground. If above ground is allowed, they should be steel poles. They should meet the requirements of the city and the provider, which that's near impossible. And the pole requirements, only the pole requirements can be waived. But what's happening is with these basically 4 rules, there are so many scenarios out there, whether it's cost prohibitive, topography, the shape of the parcel, the buildings, whatever it may be, that the waiver is the more reasonable solution. And so that's what happens. So we have basically utilities here in the city of Schertz that are installed above ground, underground, wooden poles, steel poles, both sides of the street. Sometimes they cross the street, sometimes they don't, and it's a hodgepodge. So we want to go ahead and get some clarity on that vision. What this amended article does, and it is a lot longer, so it looks a lot more difficult. It is a very hard ordinance to write, and it's a difficult ordinance to write because of all the scenarios out there. But what this ordinance does is actually looks at the zoning type, as well as, and I'm going to talk a lot about electricity because that's the major utility. It also considers the type of service. So we have primary and secondary. Primary is the larger line that goes from your substation to your transformer. Secondary is the smaller service, basically service from the transformer to your meter. What this ordinance does is considers zoning and considers that type of electricity. And when you consider that, it gives the staff tools to basically address what the development is requesting. And then it also clarifies to the developer what our expectations are. So we've had scenarios where the developer goes into has something designed, and then it's completely not what we want, but it's already the stage of the design because it was unclear. What this ordinance would do, this would be residential would go underground. Apartment, commercial, industrial are very, very much the same, is that we would allow, now keep in mind, everything can be underground, but we would provide the opportunity to go above ground on one side of the property for that primary distribution. And then secondary, like I said, the service that goes to your individual meter, that would go underground. And public use, that's like your parks, your ball fields, we're suggesting that the utilities go underground for public use. So this is a more structured ordinance, but ironically, although it's more structured, it gives us more tools and vehicles to, like I said, accomplish what Schertz wants instead of the development getting what they want. One thing to note is that existing utilities would not have to go underground. So if you have an existing overhead and then development needs to attach onto that, the requirement is not to make them go back and retrofit that and go underground. We would connect and go, the connection would be underground. This article also has utility easements in it, the direction, and right now we have some confusion about who maintains what utility easements, so we'd like to ask for some clarity for that easements are maintained by the property owner. The property owner can also mean maybe your homeowners association, but basically the property owner. Overhead utilities shall be placed in a single easement on one side of a right-of-way. And what the purpose of that is we're trying to get utilities on one side of the road, so we don't have utilities lining both sides. They will be installed according to city standards, and then this also spells out waivers. It has a process for waivers, what could be considered when offering a waiver, and then also an appeal process. So it's very spelled out, and so everybody can be on the same page. Some of the benefits of this, and keep in mind, one of the primary drivers of this is actually driving the utilities underground. That's a strong point of this ordinance, is that it provides clarity on where the primary and secondary distribution can be placed. So again, it's consistent. When you go underground, you have an increase in safety, less decreased human in contact, and then also your driver's visibility is increased. You don't have, again, the clutter of the poles lying on both sides of the road. It improves aesthetics, less visual clutter, increases property values. The system becomes more hardy because you have fewer weather-related outages as well as animal, plant-related outages. There is seemingly some public support. The residents seem to want this. There are lower operation and maintenance costs, such as you don't have tree trimming. And of course, steel poles increase resiliency, reduce damage from vehicular impact, fewer weather-related outages, and then you have the integrity of the pole to consider. Now, to be fair, as I said, it is a complex ordinance, and it can become a hard ordinance to execute. Just to recap, this one is different from the original language, is that it does allow some opportunity for overhead. What we want to do, obviously, is have cost effectiveness for our residents. Underground is more expensive. And not only underground can be more expensive, but there are also applications where overhead would be the smarter decision. Primary can run long distances. Let's take 1518, for example. That's a very, very long distance, and so it might make sense for primary to go overhead. It's just cost prohibitive to go underground. So rather than, like the first ordinance where you just waive everything, this does allow for that, so it would be a consistent application when the developer comes in, or just an extension, expansion, what have you. The developers, this would impact the developers because going underground is more expensive, so you do have the greater initial cost to the developer. On the back end, it's a lower cost. So there's that balance. The other big point on this proposal is that it allows us, again, it allows the city of Schertz to guide our vision within city limits and ETJ, and it's not what the developer wants necessarily that drives our vision, but we can consider what the developer wants and then apply these tools that have these variables so that it's consistent across the board. And that's it in a nutshell, and so I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Williams.
You're welcome.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone in attendance who would like to address the council in reference to this subject? Once again, please state your name and address.
Good evening again. Glenn Outlaw, 3729 Forsyth Park. I'm kind of speaking as the chairman of Planning and Zoning Commission. You know, we looked at this a couple weeks ago, and we forwarded on to you with a recommendation for approval. We did, there were a couple of particular concerns, and I like to say the devil's in the details. I think the two that I wanted to point out to you were where we talk about our lighting standards and making sure those are compatible with JBSA Randolph. One of the commissioners brought up, well, how do you intend to do that? And there really wasn't a procedure in place for that other than the general, well, we work with them all the time. So we thought maybe that might be one of the details they'd want to look at a little further. And then the other one that was of concern to one commissioner was, I believe, where we were talking about, where it talks about installing poles. It talks about providing conduit for the electrical, and it says as required by the city or the provider. And the commissioner was concerned because, you know, in his experience, if you give the provider or the contractor that option, they're all going to exercise it. And that, of course, means extra expense to whoever's putting in the utilities. And he felt it might be better just to leave that as a city requirement for the city to determine whether or not conduit was required rather than giving the option to the provider. So those are the two biggies that I remember. That we had several questions, but they were really editorial things, and we didn't have a whole lot of concern about the as a whole. Just again, the devil's in the detail. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else like to address the council? Right. Public hearing is closed. All right. Council, floor is open for discussion. Ms. Williams, I have just one question on slide number 4.
Okay.
You know, on the overhead, we don't mention clearance. Do you think we need to put clearance on, especially in commercial areas?
You know, we honestly didn't discuss that, but it wouldn't be, we can certainly look at that.
Because I'm afraid that they, if we set the standard at 13 and we have some trucks with 15 clearance, so that's something that we might want to address on there too.
Yeah,
I think we're going, I like the way we're moving forward on this and providing ourselves some flexibility based on where the development is occurring. But with that, Councilmember Brown?
Yeah, I agree. The flexibility is key because that's where we've tied our hands in the past, is too many shalls and not enough shoulds, you know, in our own rules. And the staff gets to the point there that I know they want to help and they want to provide solutions, but the way that we have it written, they really can't. So providing some type of flexibility out there is key to the success of our staff being able to do this without having to go through a waiver process for everything that comes across. I like that a lot. And of course, you know, when planning and zoning has questions, you know, I want to make sure that those things get addressed as well. They work with it well before we do.
Sure. No, Commissioner Brown, I can, Councilmember Brown, I can certainly answer that. We did. There was the lighting brought up, and we went ahead, and what we did was we changed the lighting section in the ordinance now refers to our UDC code. So it's a reference back, but we do add some more stuff to it because, again, the language, the original lighting language in the UDC is limited. So we do offer a bit more clarity, but the concern in planning and zoning was addressed.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Dalla?
So looking at this, you're saying that we're primarily going to want to have primary lines underground, but they have the option of requesting a waiver to go overhead with them.
Yes, sir. I mean, ideally, we'd love for that to go underground, but realistically, it could be cost prohibitive. So we don't limit it to being underground. We give them, they can go overhead. We just advise the placement of that overhead. So for example, if you have a commercial, a commercial development, you would only have primary on one side of that property and not lining like all 4 sides. So we wouldn't be boxing it in with that primary. So they can go overhead, just be limited to a side.
So then how would we make that determination to grant a waiver or not being cost prohibitive? Have we thought that far ahead as to how we're going to have that process, and what is that break point between, no, you're going to do it underground, or, yeah, okay, we can give you a waiver on this?
Well, we would allow them to go overhead in that scenario because the ordinance does allow for that overhead. So we anticipate the developer's probably going to request that overhead, and that's why we wrote that into the ordinance, because we do request it we anticipate it happening.
Okay, so we're not looking at a specific dollar amount saying it's going to cost me this much more, and, you know, I can't do this project if this is what it's going to cost me.
We haven't identified a dollar amount per se, but we want to allow them to do that. It sounds like I'm speaking out both sides of my mouth, but the current ordinance does not even allow that. And so we're adding in the allowance to this one.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're reinforce what Ms. Williams is saying. So cost is not a factor of waiver. But for commercial, for industrial, they don't need a waiver to go down that one side or to the back of the property where they don't have that opportunity now. So that's why it was written into the ordinance. You don't, because in those zoning areas, you won't need a waiver. You're by right will be allowed to go down either
Okay,
side
I got you. Okay.
or the back.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes, okay, yeah. And then, does anybody know with the electrical code if wires are underground, are they required to be in conduit or not? Or is there a certain voltage level that they have to be in conduit?
So this is where our partnership comes in with our franchise agreements. So we have with MBU, CPS, and GVEC. We have to go by their standards, and so this is where we do the partnership. So to be specific, I can't tell you. I mean, there is direct burial. We do have conduit, but at that point, we refer to our franchise standards, and they're pretty thick. They're very detailed, but that's based on our franchise agreement.
I would kind of like to see a summary on what they require for underground lines.
We can provide that.
You know, I've dealt with both just plain wire in the ground and conduit, and when you have a problem, it's a whole lot easier to fix. If you got conduit, you can just pull a wire through it and fix it.
But when you get to primary distribution, it's typically in conduit because of the size.
Yeah. And the voltage and just increased level of danger if somebody accidentally hits it.
Right, and you're at 48, 36 inch deep.
Yeah.
Okay, Council, any other comments? No other comments? Okay.
So,
Yes, Councilmember Scagliola.
Yeah, so just to back up for Mr. Outlaw's concern about the conduit, what you had a good reply as to the lighting concern, but how about a reply to the conduit concern that he addressed?
That was also addressed. One of the commissioners brought the concern is that the way the proposal was written is he interpreted that we were giving a choice that if they were to install a light that they would have, let's see, how do I say it? It was interpreted there would be a choice, and obviously the choice would be the less expensive choice. So we corrected this wording in here and then also explained that according to our franchise agreement, if we are requiring that expansion or that removal, the developer would not be required, they wouldn't have to pay for that because we're requiring it. So we did offer that explanation in the meeting, and then we clarified writing in the ordinance to address that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor, I just wanted to say that, first of all, I want to thank the staff for hard work on this. You know, the focus really is so that we're not constantly giving out waivers. And so what we want to do is make sure the ordinance covers the vast majority of situations, and we don't have to give out waivers like candy, and then the ordinance becomes, you know, it becomes worthless. So that's really what part of what we're trying to do here.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Council, is there a motion to approve ordinance 21S51?
So move.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Councilmember Scagliola, second by Councilmember Brown. Any other comments? Let's go ahead and call for the vote.
Aye.
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 We have 7 ayes, no objection, motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 10. Ordinance number 21S51, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, amending the official zoning map by rezoning approximately 2.5 acres of land to Planned Development District, PDD, located at 7809 FM 1518 North, also known as Bexar County Property Identification Number 1149102, Bexar County, Texas. First reading. Ms. Harrison, you have the floor.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, Dr. Brown. Megan Harrison. This is for ordinance number 21S51, Crossvine PDD 6th Amendment. So just to provide reference, the property here outlined in green is the approximately 2.5 acres of land. As you recall, possibly some time ago, at one of our previous meetings, we did a fourth amendment, which included the property that surrounded this, essentially they were calling it the donut hole, I guess you could say, of the Fourth Amendment that was previously approved. So in that time, they were able to complete the sale of the property, so they are coming back for the Sixth Amendment in order to incorporate that into the Crossvine PDD. So here is the public hearing notice map. We sent the notice to the mailers on November 5th, 2021, and then we had the San Antonio Express published on November 19th. Up until this meeting, I have not received any responses in favor or opposed. Here is the zoning exhibit of the 2.5 acres. Just kind of wanted to give a conceptual plan, as I know we've had several PDDs, so just to kind of provide some reference. So the Fourth Amendment that was recently done is this portion of the 57 acres, and then the Fifth Amendment, which is this tract right here. So the tract that we are speaking of tonight is the 2.5 here outlined in orange. So the proposed Crossvine PDD 6th Amendment will just incorporate the addition of the 2.5 acres into the existing PDD. The newly added area will be subject to the same rules and regulations that were previously seen in the Fourth Amendment, so it'll just essentially just adhere to those as well. Here is the PDD language for the DSFR 1s, 2, and 3. So in that PDD from the Fourth Amendment, it's incorporating the same land use allocation table that they provided. So the proposed amendment meets the intent of the previously approved PDDs and the rules and regulations set forth. The Planning and Zoning Commission did conduct their public hearing on November 17th, where a recommendation was made to City Council with a vote of 4-0. Therefore, at this time, staff does make a recommendation to approve the Crossvine PDD 6th Amendment. The applicant is here in case there's any questions, but of course I'm here as well.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Would the applicant like to say a few words?
Yeah, Chris Price, and with Schertz 1518, staff did as usual, a wonderful job of explaining what we're trying to do. We're merely bringing this 2.5 acre parcel into our, our next phase, and it would be subject to the same rules that everything else is. And I'm available for any questions that council may have.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, this is on the agenda as an open public hearing. Is there anyone in attendance who'd like to address the City Council in reference to this subject? Going once, going twice. Public hearing is closed. Council, floor is open for discussion. Yes, Councilmember Whitaker.
So the only thing I just wanted to point out, having been on the subcommittee and we've been talking about PDDs and trying to streamline that process, so having gone through that for several months basically, and then looking back at what we had approved for the Fourth Amendment, it's very different than what we've been talking about for our PDDs moving forward, but it makes complete sense that everything around this parcel has already been approved with that PDD in mind, and so I don't see any reason why this little carved out piece would not mirror exactly what those other what the Fourth Amendment was. So I'm completely in favor of it. I just wanted to point out that difference because we're going to be talking about that in a minute as well. And so I acknowledge the difference, but in this case, it makes sense.
Councilmember Scott?
Can you turn to page 7? Okay, so we're, the 5-foot side, is that 5 feet on the side of the house? Is that what I'm looking at?
Yes, ma'am.
So, I don't know, I don't have resolution with this. It kind of gives me heartburn. I know we've been back and forth on this, and I know that, we need, with the skyrocketing prices of real estate, we need houses that vets can't afford, without maxing out their VA loan. I get all of that, but I'm really struggling with this. That seems like just so close. And I know that the crossbind homes are aesthetically pleasing. I know that there's not privacy fences, but there's like steel fences where you could see where it's not such a boxy, closed-in feeling. Mm-hmm. But I'm just really struggling with the 5 foot. And I know, are we coming back to this? I mean, can I ask you that, Mayor? Or can I ask you, like, where's the city on this issue? I know that we were talking about it. And I'm sorry, I've had a really rough week, so if I'm being loopy.
Yeah, I think that's on the subcommittee that's addressing the...
Yeah, I think Megan can kind of talk about where the subcommittee's going without getting too far out of this item as it's coming up, give a little context, which is the 10 feet.
So with the subcommittee, as you'll see here in just moments, is that we did make the determination to adhere to the 10-foot side setbacks. But previously with the crossbind, that has been the Fourth Amendment that was previously approved. This is just mirroring that same PDD amendment. But in the subcommittee, we will speak of the determination from them of going to the 10-foot side setbacks.
So sometimes what you hear isn't what was said. I want to make sure that I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly.
Yes, ma'am.
So this one's going to be 5 foot, but going forward in the future, we're going to have a minimum of 10 feet. Is that right? Or am I not? Am I not connecting the dots?
You all will have to approve that.
I
This-
see.
And this is about adding a piece of property to the existing PDD.
To the extent.
Changing the PDD.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve ordinance 21S-51.
Second.
Okay, there was a lot of seconds. Who made that second?
We had stereo.
Second by all council. Did you get who made the second?
I
No?
think it was so unanimous, I don't even know who made the second.
Okay, we'll go with Councilmember, Mayor Pro Tem Dalla made the motion, second by Councilmember Hayward. Council, any other discussion? Let's go ahead and call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Aye.
We have 7 ayes, 6 ayes, 1 objection, motion passes. All right, we'll move on to a roll call confirmation. Our Deputy City Secretary, Ms. Edmondson, will provide us with a roll call confirmation for consent items 1 and 3 through 7, and also discussion items number 2 and 8 through 10.
Thank you, Mayor. Consent items number 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. The motion was made by Councilmember Whitaker, seconded by Councilmember Scott. Mayor Pro Tem Dalla, Davis, Councilmember Davis, Scott, Whitaker, Scagliola, Hayward, and Brown all voted yes. Motion passed 7-0. Item number 2, it was a resolution 21R129. The motion was made by Councilmember Whitaker, seconded by Councilmember Hayward. Mayor Pro Tem Dalla, Councilmember Davis, Scott, Whitaker, Scagliola, Hayward, and Brown all voted yes. Motion passed 7-0. Let's see. Item number 8, ordinance number 21T50, first reading. The motion was made by Councilmember Brown, seconded by Councilmember Davis. Mayor Pro Tem Dalla, Councilmember Davis, Scott, Whitaker, Scagliola, Hayward, and Brown all voted yes. Motion passed 7-0. Item number 7, ordinance number 21S49, first reading. The motion was made by Councilmember Scagliola, seconded by Councilmember Brown. Mayor Pro Tem Dalla, Councilmember Davis, Scott, Whitaker, Scagliola, Hayward, and Brown all voted yes. Motion passed 7-0. Item number 10, ordinance 21S51, first reading. Motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem Dalla, seconded by Councilmember Hayward. Mayor Pro Tem Dalla, Councilmember Davis, Councilmember Whitaker, Scagliola, Hayward, and Brown all voted yes. Councilmember Scott voted no. Motion passed 6-1.
Thank you, Ms. Edmondson. All right, we'll move on to item number 11, a workshop and presentation providing an overview of the summary of the City Council and Planning and Zoning Subcommittee. Mr. James.
Thank you very much. Brian James, Assistant City Manager for the City of Schertz. Just to remind folks watching at home or in the audience, City Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission held a series of joint meetings to try to discuss some of the current issues that we've been trying to reach agreement on with regard to single-family residential development form, essentially lot size, setbacks, density, things like that. After a number of those joint meetings, I think the general consensus was it's a fairly complicated issue. There are a lot of implications to setting one standard on other things, and that it would be best to create a subcommittee to really sort of delve into the issue. So I think after we had 3 of those joint work sessions, we went to the subcommittee format. Again, 6 members, 3 from council. Councilmember Whitaker chaired the committee. Councilmember Dolly and Scagliola sat on it, as well as Richard Breaux, Earl Platt, and then Jimmy Odom after Commissioner Greenwald's passing on it. Again, was not necessarily a quick process. Again, I think everybody understood it was a fairly complicated one. I think we had a total of 7 meetings to kind of go over some of those issues. But the kind of focus we started out with really had to do with kind of lot size and density. What's the appropriate mix that we want in the community? What's the minimum that we want in the community? Talked a lot about setbacks, the question earlier on the item, particularly the issue of side yard setback. We talked about straight zoning, our current zoning districts in the UDC versus planned development districts, why we were using planned development districts, the limitations with straight zoning, some of the benefits with straight zoning, things like that. We talked about the design standards. Building a residential subdivision that fits the vision of Schertz is more than just simply lot size. It's other things that play into it as well. And then finally, we hit one of the topics outside of that, which is the tree mitigation ordinance, as you heard the comment from earlier tonight. We've talked a number of times with Parks Board, Council P&Z about the fact that our tree ordinance generally works pretty well unless you have a heavily wooded lot. And if you have a heavily wooded lot, despite what you try to do to preserve trees, because of a variety of factors, people have to take out a lot of trees, and those fees can be substantial. And so the idea was look at some tweaks there. But again, one of the things that the subcommittee really dealt with getting back into the residential is this issue of R6 and R7 with straight zoning. And council and folks may know that we have R6 and R7 zoning districts in our UDC, R6 with a 7,200 square foot minimum, R7 6,600 square foot minimum. But about 10 years ago, our city council amended the UDC to basically state that they would no longer grant those zoning districts going forward. So if a person had properties on that, they could develop under it, but if they wanted to come in and zone, those were not available for new zoning, which really left, I think, 8,400 as the smallest straight zoning district lot size you could have. And the problem that we faced as a community is developers walked in and said, yeah, that may be kind of what I'm trying to do, but a lot of them said that lot's just too big for who we're marketing property for. And so we went to the PDD as a solution, but with that there was still ambiguity. What's sort of the standard? What are we striving for? And then I think, frankly, as often happens in communities, times change, things change. And so the issues we faced 10 years ago are not the issues we face today. One of those is, how do we become a sustainable community, or how do we continue to be a sustainable community? And part of that has to do with diversity of housing type. It's great to have a lot of large lots, but is there going to be market, is there going to be demand for just large lots going forward? When we talk about economic development and the need for housing that's more affordable, for example, for city employees, for teachers, for the folks who are working in the industrial parks, can they afford a $300,000 house, which is roughly what the new median home value is? And some of the issues had to do with our development standards. If we require bigger lots, more things to be built, that tends to push the price up. But frankly, it's part of a larger issue in terms of the cost of land, the cost of building materials. Our new median home value isn't that different than San Antonio's in many of the communities around us, so it's a problem a lot of communities face. And so part of what council, or the committee I think talked about too, is while the PDD process has some benefits, it has some drawbacks. One is the ambiguity. How do we kind of set a standard versus everybody just comes in with what they want to do and there's no rhyme or reason to it, which becomes problematic for a couple of reasons. The other, it is a long, cumbersome process. There's a lot that has to be worked out with that, and so it's not uncommon for developers to come in and they'll be at it at least a year, year and a half before that comes forward. And again, that length of process adds cost to projects, and it creates uncertainty, and so there are probably some developments that would have been very good in the community, but because of that uncertainty, that length of time, they drop out. So part of what the committee recommended is that for those smaller tracts of land that really don't have the ability to do a great diversity of lot sizes, and I think the committee talked a lot about, they heard from developers and what they understood, that many developers said, look, when we have a phase, we're kind of doing one product type there. We may have a couple of builders, but the price point generally is the same, the look and feel are the same, the lot size is the same. They can't be having a 6,000 square foot lot next to a 9,000 square foot lot, next to a 7,000 square foot lot, and that continue on throughout. They need to kind of say, look, generally we're going to be coming in with lots typically between, say, 7,000 and 8,000. We may have a few corner ones that get a little bigger, but that's kind of what our bread and butter for that phase is. And then this space may be bigger, this space may be smaller. And so because of that, when somebody has a smaller tract of land, 30 or 40 acres, the recommendation was that we allow that straight zoning on those smaller pieces of land. So if somebody comes in and they have, say, 35 acres, they could walk in and request straight zoning for R6 at 7,200 square feet. Conversely, if they've got, say, 20 acres, they could come in and request 6,600 square feet of zoning. Now, one of the things that there was concern about is we can't have people kind of in-run the system and just break up their land into smaller pieces. Now I get everybody coming in with 30-acre tracts wanting 6,600. So the idea is through the comp plan process, we'll kind of develop zones within the city and kind of limit the number of that we would have kind of coming in, or look at that lotting pattern and make some decisions there. So we don't want to open it up to everybody, but it's to deal with those and provide some flexibility. And then so again, if it's larger than that 70 acres, they could mix and match that straight zoning, but if they're bigger than that, and they want to do just those, they really need to kind of come in for the PDD with some criteria to it. And so I'll move to that. So, but before I do that, I will talk about some of the design standards, because one of the issues we have with straight zoning is the things that we tend to incorporate in our planned development district zoning in terms of design standards, we don't have for straight zoning. And so a couple of those were, and some of this may seem minor, but we've heard residents say it makes a big difference. When we have those mail kiosks, the fact that there's no place for them to pull out of the lane of traffic. And so the idea was, let's do 2 off-street parking spaces for each mail kiosk. Now that could be kind of a bow out of the pavement for parallel spaces. That could be something where they create a couple of little parking lot thing like that. But one of the benefits of that is that could be a place that buses could pull in and pick up school buses, for example. And that goes with the next requirement, is cover mailboxes. There was a lot of empathy toward mail carriers and them having to stand out in the rain for an hour to fill up that, and all our stuff get wet. You know, so for instance, if John Nowak were waiting for his latest issue of Public Works Engineering Street Construction magazine to come out, he wouldn't want that to be soaking wet. He's still here. Kathy's here. He left, but Kathy will mention this to him. But the other benefit of that is it gives a little bit of an area, again, for kids waiting for the bus to kind of wait under a bit of a covered area. It doesn't have to be that way, but we felt like that makes sense for our residents. It's a fairly straightforward thing to do and has a couple of dual benefits. The other thing that we talked about is when we looked a lot at the subdivisions we liked and the subdivisions that we said, I wish we'd done that a little bit different. While it didn't always make or break the subdivision, a little bit of curve in the road was viewed as beneficial, that we didn't want all those long, straight shots. Now, again, for example, we're pretty used to seeing that in our older part of town. Back when communities built in the 50s and 60s, you had that grid pattern, but it was a very different way than a gridded subdivision is built today. And so while people look at that and go, that's really neat, it doesn't bother me because there are lots of streets. Typically, when we get those straighter streets and newer subdivisions, it's not as aesthetically pleasing. We may have more speeding issues associated with it, things like that. And so the idea is let's build in some deflection. So we've kind of come up with some standards. And as we go through to pass an ordinance to incorporate and adopt these, we'll flesh this out with engineering and public works and folks. But the idea is to require a certain quantifiable standard of a certain degree of deflection for every length. So you got to bow that street a bit, kind of changes your view a bit. It causes streets on the outside to kind of be a bit bigger, the others inside to be a bit smaller going forward. The other thing that we talked about is the need for usable open space. And so with our Parks Master Plan, again, typically in our UDC currently, we require parkland dedication or a fee in lieu of. And because of cost effectiveness and economies of scale, we typically don't want small little city-owned parks. And so the ordinance has a provision for credit for private open space that's usable within a subdivision, but it's not necessarily required. So a developer with a smaller subdivision that the city says, yeah, you don't have a piece of land we want because we've got a city park next door, or it's not big enough, then typically they may choose not to do open space, just lot it all out, pay the fee. What we've said is, no, if you need to have some usable open space, and so if there's not a city park, then you need to incorporate that in. We've set a standard, and again, we'll go through and flesh this out, make sure our numbers are right, but generally it's 1 acre for the first 100 lots, ½ acre for the next 100 lots going forward. And it needs to be dispersed in ½ acre pieces. What we don't want to see is like 1/10 of an acre piece of land that you get there and go, wait, we're playing football and you're out of bounds already because you're in the street because it's so small. We don't want it to be in a drainage easement, things like that. It needs to be usable, and we also want to disperse it through the subdivision so we can create some distance standards for that. Again, we want to have some flexibility, but the idea is don't concentrate it at one end of the community, don't put it under a big utility easement with overhead lines, which now wouldn't be there with our new standard. It's a little joke because it's residential will be underground. We want it to be usable. Again, I say that with Cypress Point Park. If you've seen that, that was a lesson learned for the city not to do. So build in that open space for everybody to use. And again, really kind of go in and say, we still have the option to use PDDs, planned development districts, but what we're trying to do is build off what our normal standard would be for a larger lot from a bit more diversity. And one of the things I think the committee talked about is developers need a clear understanding of what's going to be okay with a PDD, what's not, and that way staff can move them through much more quickly through that process. And so with that, you know, we talked about, and here's an example, with a PDD, we're trying to get that median and mean lot size of 7,600 square feet. Because we've looked in the past at discussions, well, what has this subdivision been? What has that subdivision been? And we've been a little bit all over the place. And so the idea is we're going to shoot for 7,600 square feet. It's smaller than that RS2, so it makes provision for being able to do some smaller lots with it, and gives you an example. So the median and mean, again, to make sure we understand why that's useful, and again, I have to be reminded of this, Councilman Scagliola doesn't, but what we're looking at is an average. So if you take each lot they've got, add up the square foot, divide by number of lots, that gives you one. The other is we rank order them largest to smallest, and if you come halfway down that list, you should hit it there. And by using the two of those, we balance the fact that you can't have just a couple of really ginormous lots to skew your average. and it gets us a better picture. So we'll work both of those going forward. And then the idea that we talked about with PDDs is we don't want, if they've got all their smaller lots, we don't want them to cluster them in one end of the development. We know they need to create kind of those reasonable phases or pods, if you will, but we don't necessarily want them all at one end and the bigger over here. Kind of mix and match in a reasonable kind of pattern going forward with that pod. And so we think we can define that. And that's really what we came back on residential. And so the way this process would work if we don't hear opposition from council tonight is we'll go back, we'll start crafting that ordinance language, we'll work with P&Z on that. Again, we presented to them last meeting and they said, yep, we're good, we get the vision, we're there. And so now that we know what we're trying to get, it helps us to work that ordinance and say, does this get it, does that not get it? And I think we can move fairly quickly and then come back to council and pass this. But we've started telling developers this is the direction we think we're headed with. 3 people on council who were on the subcommittee. We think it's generally consistent with what a lot of council talked about. P&Z's okay with it. And so we've gotten some good feedback already. So I think we have a comp plan amendment going tomorrow night to P&Z. They're aware of this and are keeping in mind that they've got a fairly large, this is likely the standard they'll be held to and come in with, and they think that's useful. And so it'll be a good first test case of how quick can we move in through the process and meet what we want to do. So I don't know if any of the subcommittee members would like to chime in now on that part of it.
Thank you, Mr. James. First of all, I just wanted to point out that we spent at least 8 or 9 hours total over the course of the 7 meetings, probably more than that because we went over a few times, with the six committee members, staff, and, thank you so much for all your time and, just the putting this together, putting the information in front of us in a logical way so that we could work our way through it over those 7 weeks. I just want to reiterate that as a group, we spent hours discussing each one of these items in detail. The 6 members were not in agreement on a lot of things because we all have different experiences, different preferences, different visions. But as a whole and as a group, we came to an agreement that these things were all acceptable for the city as far as what our vision would be going forward. And, some of us had to compromise on some things or another, but I think we were all really happy with the results. So I just wanted to reiterate again that it was just a lot of work. And, thank you, Mr. James, for presenting it in a very concise way. I'm listening to you talk about it, and to me, I can hear all of the background conversations, and it makes so much more sense when you were there. So I know it's probably, difficult and people have concerns maybe or questions. With just the final result, but just want to, again, remind people that there was so much discussion that went into this, and I think it's a great option. Again, this is an opportunity to present to developers that if we agree to this, and then the developers follow these particular guidelines, they can streamline their process.
Right.
It doesn't take away their option ask for something other than this. So they will still have that option, and we can approve or deny those variations. But this just says we, as a group, are going to agree on these items, and therefore, if they come forward and ask for a PDD that has these pieces to it, there should be no more discussion. We want to eliminate that from our process and make things move a lot quicker. Also, because I think one of the heavily most discussed issues, throughout the months previous to this were the lot sizes. Again, just to reiterate that the R6 and R7, which we are allowing in this in certain proportions to a full development, is actually both of those, the R6 and R7, are both smaller than the average lot size in the region. So we're talking about the whole full San Antonio region. So in real estate in general, in residential neighborhoods, an average, I would say, a very common lot size has a 50-foot frontage. The R6 and R7 are both bigger than that. So what we're saying is, as a minimum for these automatic approval part of this new design standards, is actually larger than what the region has. And so as a community, we would still stand out as a slightly higher quality product in neighborhoods, but still allowing a little bit more affordability than pushing up to the really high number acreage kind of lots. So anyway, thank you so much for all your efforts, and I think we came together with some good information.
Yes, other council members on the subcommittee, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll echo that sentiment. We came in with some pretty diverse views and opinions, and I don't think everybody walked away from this totally happy, but we all walked away with something that we think is good for the city. It's one of those instances where compromise was a really good thing. You know, you covered it pretty well. You know, for the rest of the council members, if you have questions, you know, ask. But I think this is a good way to go, and you know, let's try this for a couple of years, and let's see what the product and end result is, what we get from this. And of course, you know, this is not set in stone. It's not forever, and if at some point we see something going wrong, then we'll come back and change it.
Council members, carried over.
Yeah, thanks, Brian, for putting this out. Yeah, there's a lot of council meetings where people just talk about the issues of planning and zoning, you know, just sucking the oxygen out of the air, it seems. I'm glad I'm not one of those. You know, being an aviator, though, I do have a higher tolerance for hypoxia. I can keep going even with a little bit of oxygen in the air. No, seriously, though, I think something we discovered is we were mostly in general agreement on pretty much, well, almost everything we discussed. It was just a different degree or maybe a different verbiage. Mm-hmm. And I really do appreciate you finding the correct verbiage to actually press some of these particular points. I like the transparency of it all. We got to air our concerns, and quite frankly, I'm pleased with the outcome. And maybe I won't be sucking so much oxygen out of the air in the future. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'm having problems breathing. No, I just want to say, you know, when developers look at our plans and they look at our PDD and our standards and you know, and they approach us and they have acceptable standards, and that's where we had the misalignment. I'm glad the committee, the subcommittee got together and made some compromises, because it will make it easier for developers to know exactly what is expected from our city, and they can go ahead and put in their computers and their programs and lay the outline based on our standards. It speeds up the process. They know that in reality, maybe 90 to 95% of the time, if the plan meets these standards, they'll get approved. It's the variations that we'll have to discuss later on. But thanks to the committee, subcommittee, getting this together, and thanks to our staff for providing the information to come to a decision.
You're certainly welcome, and again, a lot of the credit goes to Emily and Meg and Lisa, who did a lot of that legwork and background and research and pulling stuff together. A couple of closing things on this, and then I'll move to the tree part. Again, one of the things that, because we talk about the R6, R7, and R2, is we felt like our current zoning districts work pretty well for us. And one of the ideas is just stick with those setbacks and standards there. And so per the previous question, generally going forward, a new project coming in, we're going to want the 10-foot side yard setbacks. We'll have a couple legacy projects that they've started on a path, and we'll probably continue that way. And we may have a radically different project come in that we need to look at with a different eye. But again, I think we felt like using those current zoning districts gets us there. So just as next step, we'll go back, we'll work to craft the ordinance, work that through P&Z, and see, you'll come up forward with council. The other is just a reminder, and this goes to the item earlier tonight, is we held off on starting the comp plan because we felt like if we didn't have agreement on this new residential built form, we would be all over place with the comp plan update. And so what staff will do now is we'll dust off the RFQ, we'll put that out, we'll start moving forward with that, knowing that those areas we want to designate for sort of suburban style residential, this is what we'll get. And so it'll let us move forward on that process.
Yes, Councilmember Brown.
We're focusing on the new developments.
That's right.
Okay. And, yeah, I don't know whether y'all talked about it or not, or where it's going to fit in, but some flexibility in the existing older subdivisions as well, to infill different types of housing in there, because we got some areas that have big lots that you could put a duplex or triplex or something like that in there, that would allow some variety of housing, in the existing areas. Just some thoughts in there, because we have a lot of old housing that is just old, and they won't benefit from all the PDD that where, for example, at Crossvine, it's going to come in from everything from large lots to garden homes and multifamily, all under the one big plan.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think, so if you'll remember, we're going to update the comp plan, and as we get into that, we're going to start updating the UDC. Some of that stuff we'll kind of come right on the heels with, others will finish the comp plan, then finish. But yeah, I think one of the big questions, a couple of big questions that we have to kind of deal with as a community is, one, how do we maintain areas being sustainable? Because the houses in our older parts of town that were built on different lot sizes, I think what we typically hear from folks is, I don't want to damage the character of that area, but I want those houses to be livable today. Again, if you've lived in an older house, often those older houses have one bathroom. That's great at first when you first get married and it's two of you and you're trying to manage it, but when you have a couple kids and you're trying to deal with one bathroom, it becomes a challenge. And you're right, how do we allow people to add on, to put in a second bathroom so that neighborhood is sustainable and more livable? I think that's something we're going to have to hit going forward. So, yeah, good point with that. So that's the residential. The next spot to be fairly quick with was this issue of, oh, yes, ma'am.
Yes, Councilmember.
I didn't need to jump the gun there.
It's all right. Before we go to the next one, because I'm real sensitive about trees, but I want to weigh in on this one. Without knowing all the blood, sweat, and tears, I'm a very hard sell. And I was pretty swayed by your eloquence, and I was thinking of two of my sons have bought new houses within the past 12 months, and I've been involved with some of those decisions. Plus, I drive past brand new subdivisions that are going up like wildfire. And I wished I would have gone first without knowing the blood, sweat, and tears, because I felt it was almost like an apologetic, like you put all this work into it, so you better like it. That's not the case. You put all this work into it, and it's fantastic. Y'all, actually, I can live without even knowing about San Antonio's medium. I can live with 7,600 square foot lots. That's not, a cracker box per se. I loved what you said about the curved streets. Whenever I go to some neighborhoods off of Benz Engelman and 1560, man, they're shotgun houses. It's oppressive, but put a little curve in the street and it's charming all of a sudden. There's a neighborhood in Elmendorf where they have a open space and it's just a kid little playground with some plastic things, but it's charming. The whole community just goes out there and it takes out the oppression and makes it livable and for the sustainable. So I wanted to congratulate y'all. I like this and I liked it a lot. And I also liked your point about don't just have the big ones in one space and the little ones over here. Make it integrated, have it interspersed throughout. So you're really looking at the aesthetic and the vibe. And this is appropriate for the times because the times aren't necessarily changing. They've already changed. That train left the station and people are moving in Texas hand over fist, and we have to see where we're going abreast of all of that change. So everyone on the committee, congratulations. I thought this was a very good job.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, let's look at tree mitigation.
All right, so again, the issue, just as a reminder what the current ordinance says, is generally, unless it's exempt from the mitigation requirement, and so there's some trees that are, but we have protected trees and heritage trees. Protected trees are 8 inches up to 24 inches, and then heritage are 24 inches and greater. Again, the mitigation, if you take out that tree and it's not exempt, is a 1-to-1 ratio, or $100 per inch, and that's for protected. For heritage trees, it's a 3-to-1 mitigation, $300 per inch. And again, Generally, I think what our ordinance does is it gets developers to be thoughtful about trees. They start thinking about the money, how can I save this? Often their self-interest is there. If I can keep some trees, it's a nicer development, charge higher rent, sell for higher prices. But the problem is on those heavily wooded lots, because again, we have a number of different things that trees create a problem. So we don't want trees in our utility easements. It's real hard to install a water line, sewer line with trees in the way. The other is with our drainage ordinance, we've got to get that lot to drain appropriately so we can do detention if needed. We're not flooding out somebody downstream. And that regrading often means you're cutting land and you're taking trees out. And so because of going back and looking at the problems, what we thought is let's not kind of reinvent the wheel, because generally our ordinance works well. Let's basically just go in and let's add and say the maximum amount of tree mitigation per acre is capped at $10,000. Now, don't get me wrong. You've got 10 acres, you're still paying $100,000 potentially in tree mitigation. It's substantial. But again, as we've talked about some developments that we look at today, you know, the Legacy at Forge Ridge Retirement Center that paid, I think, over a couple $100,000. I don't think anybody goes and looks at that and says they didn't try to save trees, they didn't plant a bunch of trees, but they still had to mitigate. So again, as a reminder, developers can plant trees, they can pay the fee. If they preserve extra stuff, that's helpful as well. And so the idea, to be simple, keep with the ordinance most people are used to, is just cap it at 10,000 per acre and move forward that way. And so that's the other recommendation. Again, ran it through P&Z. They seem to make sense. And again, I think one of the things is it's just a really tough deal. Nobody likes to see trees come out. But it's really hard to develop at times. So what we think we've done is found that balance of there's enough of a payment that developers are going to think about trying to preserve trees and doing what they can. And so with that, that would be our other recommendation to run forward.
Thank you. I think this was an excellent one because you know, developers, and like you said, they're looking at 20 acres, and they have no idea what the tree mitigation is going to be. I think on one situation, he had 40 acres, and we gave him the estimate of $800,000 because we had no idea what was in there. Knowing this, you know, he knows what the cap is, and it allows him for planning and also what the maximum cost would be. And I think this was an excellent way of approaching this tree mitigation. It will certainly open up our doors to development because now they know what the max is.
That's right. I think, and again, we talked about that a lot with the ordinance earlier tonight on utilities. Part of that is providing clarity. You know, when Lisa and I talk about this a lot, developers typically go on the front end, tell me what I need to do, then tell me how long it's going to get me through the process. And then I can make an informed decision to go or no go. But it's when I get hit with unexpected costs or unexpected delays that's a challenge. So you're right. For a developer to extend an option long enough to do the due diligence, tree surveys are not insignificant. So under the current ordinance, if you want to know, you got to go survey it. So you got to spend a bunch of money to get to an answer that you're still not sure what's exempt, what's not. So we think it helps us there.
My number one question here is going to be on, let's take, for instance, we have 40 acres, and 30 of them have nothing on there. And then you look at the other 10 acres, which is heavily wooded. How do you determine what the max will be?
So likely, and we hadn't thought about that, so that's a good question. That's a bit of the devil in the detail going forward when we hit P&Z. I don't know, we'll float that question. We'll say, look, do we want to come up with a system where we sort of draw a circle around the area and say, all right, let's take the acreage of that, and that becomes the amount of the cap. Do we spread it over the whole thing? You know, that we need to work through. Yeah. So again, you hadn't thought of that, and so that's something when we go through the ordinance, we'll bring up and say, how do we deal with this? And so we'll give a few examples and decide how we want to craft that.
All right, thank you. Okay, council, floor is open for discussion. Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, and you are going to give whatever the right term is, leeway for the developers when you require them to clear areas for utility easements and things along that line? Versus making them pay to remove the trees so we can put in the utilities?
Are you wanting us to make them pay even if they have to put in the utilities?
No.
No, the opposite. Okay, no. We're not going to change the current exemption we have. So we currently have exemptions in the ordinance that say, if it's in right, if it's in this, if it's in that, you don't have to mitigate. So again, for example, if we tell a developer, you need to install a sewer line through here, he's probably not happy he's having to pay to install a sewer line. And yeah, if we didn't have an exemption for that, imagine how frustrated it'd be to go, so I got to spend this much money to put a sewer line in, and I don't have a choice, and then I'm also, yeah, that wouldn't be fair.
And that's why I'm just...
So we're going to leave the exemptions that we have, and we think those are pretty workable.
Councilmember Hayward?
So I know with the cap, are we also giving people credit for saving trees on this, or is it just be?
No, we still do that now, so we're not changing any of that sort of going forward. And again, we are also maintaining, you can't take out every tree. Folks still have to preserve a minimum percentage of trees within the project, and that'll stay in there. So you can't clear cut and take everything out going, I only have to pay $10,000. You've still got to meet that preservation percentage.
So then they still have to get a tree survey?
They still have to get a tree survey. The problem we have, and this is the challenge, is if you don't know what's there, you don't know what all comes out. So we've got to kind of figure that out as we go forward. But yeah, I mean, I think ideally, if we can find a workable solution on those large tracts that they don't have to do the survey, we probably will. But we haven't come up with a good solution yet. It could be that they come in and they we've talked about walking it with them and looking at it and marking certain trees that want to be preserved, but we're not quite there yet, so I don't want to overpromise.
Because I just know that sometimes those surveys can be quite costly on top of.
They can be.
Councilmember Davis?
I feel like Councilman Scagliola tonight. It's just amazing. I really
suck
never
the oxygen out of the room on this one.
Yeah, I never pictured myself on this side of the coin on this topic, but I'm just not seeing this. I mean, I don't see where this is necessarily being any more beneficial to any potential developer in the city of Schertz based on what we had before this. I've got a long history in parks. I love open space. I'd love to preserve trees as much as I can, but at the same time, when you look at our tree mitigation program, we penalize somebody that has a piece of property that is heavily wooded, and we do nothing to, or have no concerns about someone that's got an open lot. Someone who's developing an open lot has to come back in and meet our landscaping requirements and put in trees. If you've got a heavily wooded lot, you can offset some of the requirements for landscaping by saving some trees that are out there, but you pay a much heavier price. That's just such a variable factor depending on the lot. It's interesting to see the 10,000 per acre cap, but again, we have no mechanism, and we said earlier tonight, the devil's in the details, but we have no details on how that would apply if you had like a 40 or 50 acre lot, and where do you draw the lines, and how do you determine what is covered under 10,000 and not, and do I have the ability to gerrymander my property to figure out a way to avoid $10,000? I'm not sure that this meets the spirit and intent for me going forward on how we properly look at a piece of property and give guidance to a developer with regards to tree mitigation. Again, the survey factor is not included in here with the cost that they have to incur with surveying a heavily wooded lot. I think the 10,000 per acre is just arbitrary and kind of hard to figure out. It's probably even more confusing than just coming back and saying these are protected or heritage trees. At the end of the day, again, I don't want to see any lot just clear cut and cut down, But again, when you look at our comp plan and how we develop in the city, I guess it depends on what you're going to put in what lots. If it's a residential area, yeah, I guess you want a lot of trees. But if the particular area in our comp plan, our development plan, is an area that's industrial or manufacturing, at the end of the day, the trees are going to go away. You know, I like the idea that we put an effort on protecting heritage trees that are 24 inches or greater. I'm just not sure that the numbers in my mind add up, that this gives us a way to go forward to help those that are trying to develop property that they have. They can do so in a sensible way that is not overly burdensome or overly taxing on them, simply because they just happen to have a piece of property that is heavily wooded.
So if I may, and I can certainly appreciate that, and so a couple of points. I think one issue, and we've talked about this before, is this, call it a level playing field standard. And so the guy that has the heavily wooded lot and the guy that doesn't, on the one hand, this developer has to pay for a tree survey, they've got to pay mitigation up to whatever amount. This person doesn't have any of that. You're right, there's inherently not a way to equalize that. And I think maybe if staff seems, yep, there's not a way to equalize it, it's because we would probably say no two properties are created equal. So you have one that's encumbered with floodplain, you have another that's not. That more costs, more challenges. You have one piece of property that the city happened to have gone in 5 years ago and put in the road and put in the water line. That's already there for them. This piece doesn't. We're saying you have to install the road going in and water line. And so I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm simply saying that staff would acknowledge that, but we would probably say, but no property is created equal. And there's not a way to equalize that and have some standard, because even the heavily wooded lot, that developer has to save a certain percentage of trees. And so they're restricted to begin with. Take the mitigation aside, and this developer over here has a blank slate because there are no trees on it. What I will say is that goes into the price of the property, and some in the real estate business can chime in. Folks look at that and they go, this is my cost to develop this piece, this is what I can do with it, this is my cost for this piece is worth more than this piece and I'll pay more, and that's accounted for. And so valid, fair point, and again, if that's the direction council wants to go, then yeah, we probably need to kind of go back to the drawing board, and what I'm hearing is try to level the playing field. I don't think anybody wants to say impose some fee on the guy or plant more trees that doesn't have trees, which means reducing the amount on the other. I think it's fair to say that, yeah, 10,000 is arbitrary. If you came back and said, let's make it 7,500, let's make it 12,500, you could certainly do that. But frankly, much of what we do is there's some basis for it, but inherently at the end of the day, you're just saying go with that. So for instance, $100 per inch. It's a big round number, but why not 90, or why not 110? It's just that sort of dollar figure. To the other point, which is how do we deal with that? My initial inclination is we would try to find some way. We would need to work with the city attorney. Unfortunately, we have the best city attorneys out there, and find some way to define the area with trees, because where we have a problem isn't scattered trees. It tends to be a property owner that's got a big cluster of trees. And I think if the intent is to kind of limit it based on that area, I'd probably go with some method to draw a circle around it if we can figure out how to do it, as opposed to you got 40 acres, you only have trees on 5. It seems counter to what we're trying to do to say you have to pay up to $400,000 on the 440. So I think we'd try to find a way to deal with that going forward.
Like I said, it's hard to visualize this, you know, especially when you bring up a reference and say, okay, I got 40 acres that's heavily wooded, 10,000, it's $10,000 per acre, that's $400,000. To me, it would almost be, I'd like to see a comparison of a previous project that
paid X under our former method. Pardon? Okay, so for example, the one that's going on 3009, and I look at 3009, there's a lot of undeveloped property on 3009 that's definitely affected by this. But it would be interesting to see a property that paid X in tree mitigation, and what would have been the change if there was a cap of $10,000 per acre. Because if it works out to the same amount or a higher amount, then to me, it's accomplished nothing.
So I think, and Lisa can chime in and the folks in planning, Bush's Chicken, I think is about an acre and paid about $60,000, I think is the figure that comes to mind. So staff feels like the $10,000 an acre is substantially less than those heavily wooded lots have paid in the past. And so I will say this, if council says, move on with the rest stuff, come back again on this, we can certainly come back and we can say, here's the projects that have kind of paid the most, here's how many acres they were, here's what that would be at the 10,000. We can provide that for you. Not an issue for us to come back and have that conversation.
Yeah, I just wouldn't mind seeing a couple comparisons of, like you gave the example of Bush's Chicken. I wouldn't mind seeing a comparison with the Kellum Medical Center that's going up, or some of the other recent developments of what they paid and what it could have been if it was a $10,000 cap.
So what we can even do,
especially if we take into consideration the requirements for a tree survey, which, I mean, that's not even a factor that we mention on here. You know,
But you're still going to have a tree survey, because so none of the requirements that we currently have under tree mitigation were removed, correct?
That's correct.
So all that the reason this came up is because I think in general people felt a certain way, but specific businesses came forward who said, I want to develop some property in Schertz, and it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars on a couple of acres for this tree mitigation fee. And so that was the very specific problem that we came up that was presented to us, and this is specifically addressing that specific problem. So we haven't had complaints on the other end of it. So I guess my concern is that, number one, I'm not saying push this through, and obviously we need to address our concerns, but as part of the committee, the majority of the committee was spent on the PDD standards, and this was a smaller part of it. But we did discuss the issues that we talked about at previous meetings, and we did look at several examples, and we had numbers, so I think that would be very helpful and it would be illuminating. But I am quite certain that in every example that the $10,000 per acre cap was, a tenth of what they would have paid, or it was a significantly less, and it was addressing the concern. And as well, I will point out that the chamber has commented on it. I think they've reviewed, what we've been discussing. The businesses that have been affected, are going to be affected in the short term, are in favor of this proposal. So, if that's fair to say, if you've heard from them specifically. So I just want to, reiterate that a concern was brought up, and I think in general we felt we all felt the same, that was crazy to be charging hundreds of thousands of dollars for tree mitigation fees when we have nowhere to, use it and spend it and things like that. So I do think it's addressing the problem that we had.
We can come back with two things fairly.
What would a tree survey have to be done?
So,
because I would offer the argument, if I had a 2-acre lot on 3009 that's heavily wooded, as a developer, I could probably look there and say, well, look, I got a whole bunch of 8-inch, 24-inch trees that's heavily wooded. Why don't I just pay the $20,000, and that way it's saving me the money on a tree survey, and it's saving me money on everything else, because you're telling me the maximum that you're going to charge me is $10,000 per acre.
That's right. And so the reason they would still have to is we have a requirement to save a certain percentage of those trees on the property. And I don't know what that is without the survey. So a couple things I'll...
Okay.
So a couple things I'll offer. What we can come back with is, here what some projects have paid in mitigation, we can make the comparison. We can also get a feel from some of the developers that have come in with those projects, or call some companies and say, what's the cost of a tree survey? So if you kind of had this, what's that cost? And so we know if what people are paying on those typical tree surveys, a few $1,000s, or they're paying $100,000, fair enough. The issue that we've got on not requiring the tree survey, and I can appreciate it because staff would say, well, if we didn't have to review a tree survey, that's great, we can work on other stuff, we're not as busy. But again, the couple issues that we've got, one is the fact that we have a requirement that says you have to save a certain percentage of those trees on the property. And without the survey, there's not a way to know that and know what it is. And I don't think we've been able to find an efficient way around that. Because the challenge is we all like to think the developer would say, oh, well, I'm not going to do anything I shouldn't do. And yet, some developers do that. And I think one of the things that, and just to think about is, what the reaction from our residents would be when a development comes in next door and they say, do you have a tree ordinance? Yeah, we have a tree ordinance. Did they do a tree survey? Do you know what they took out? And we said, nope, they're not required to do a tree survey. They simply paid this $10,000 cap, and they've indicated to us that they preserved the minimum requirement that's out there. And those residents would say, well, how do you know they did that? I'd say, we don't. But I can appreciate the issue of if there is a way to deal with it. And I want to be clear, I hesitate to offer this up even, so we really need to think about it. But at times on some smaller jobs and things like that, we'll send staff out. So typically it's Lauren and Jared, and we'll go, can you go out there? Can you look at what they've got? Tell me how many trees they've got. Tell me what shape they look in. Kind of walk it. Let's see if we can sort of save the money on a tree survey to do it. And in some cases, that's reasonable to do. We've got a couple in the older part of town where they've gone down there and walked and looked and said, nope, this is this and this is this, and it's very straightforward. I just hesitate to offer that up on some of these bigger projects that really are that sort of challenge, because we just don't have the resources to do it. That can take a significant amount of time just to walk it and kind of have staff effectively do a tree survey with it. I don't know. Let me think about that. You think about that. We'll come back with that data if you want, and then we can kind of mull that one up.
Yeah, it would be interesting to find out exactly how much a survey costs. And
we can provide that.
We can provide maybe a discount, a percentage.
Maybe it's a credit for the cost of the tree survey that's within reason, something like that we can do.
Because some of these trees, they might be 24 inches in diameter, but if they're halfway on the ground, I mean, it's not much of a tree.
Yeah, and again, understand that the ordinance says if the trees are diseased or dying or things like that, that's exempted as well. That's one reason. So we have that. If we walk out and Parks has gone out and looked at it and said, oh yeah, that thing's not going to make it, we'll count it. We do that as well.
But it certainly is a start.
Yeah, it's a start. The other thing we can do is we can tie this in with, maybe to Councilman Davis's point, some greater flexibility with our landscape requirements, because one of the issues, and they need to shake their heads or not, is if they preserved a tree, it kind of needs to be in the vicinity of where they're required to plant the tree to get credit for it towards their landscaping. And so maybe what we do is we ease up on that and say, look, if you're saving these trees, it doesn't necessarily have to be here, it'll count back here. Now that'll mean you won't get as many up here, but that's something that we can look at. So mull that over and we can have more conversations.
Hey, Council, any other comments?
Just as an example, I think Keller or Kellum said they had to pay $375,000 approximately.
I think it was $257,000 if I'm not mistaken.
Or maybe that was Revolution Church with $357,000.
Yeah, Revolution's,
around 370 for Kellum. Do you remember how many acres?
6.
6. Yeah.
6, and I think we're holding development based on this tree mitigation issue.
No, that's not why they got some other issues.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great example of a company that's going to save trees for aesthetics anyway, plus to meet our other city requirements, and $300,000 and some odd versus $60,000.
So let us provide some data, let us run some traps on some things. Again, don't have to rush this one through. Again, we do have a waiver provision, so if there's anybody that's hung up on it, they can come forward under the current waiver, and we can take the time to get this one right. But I think we can move fairly quickly.
Councilmember Scott?
Yeah, I didn't want this one to go without weighing in on it. Kellum's directly in back of my house, and those trees they took out, it breaks my heart. Those things were old, and they were home to a lot of wildlife, and that was very sad.
Yeah.
I think trees are worth saving. I've changed so much. When I was 20, I heard about Austin, Texas. They couldn't put in a road because of an old granddaddy oak tree. They had to split the road and go around it. I thought it was the most ludicrous thing I ever heard. Now that I'm older, I think it's the most awesome thing I've ever heard. You should save your trees. Some of them are as old as Texas, older than Texas. If you look at the fire station out Lower Seguin Road, there's a gorgeous tree there. If you look at the Baptist Emergency Hospital, there's a gorgeous tree there. We paid close to 8 times more than our neighbors just to get the old trees. They're awesome. And so for real estate, I think that you could charge more for the for the lots for those. But regardless of all that, you know, I have to weigh in on, thank y'all for keeping that part of it to save the trees. And I was just horrified whenever a person from the Chamber of Commerce said, why can't we treat all land like the barren land? Yeah. And that was just, I mean, it made my blood run cold. Like, no, everything's not all about money. We can't get dollar signs in our eyes. We have to leave this earth to our children and our grandchildren. And so I do think we're moving in the right direction. I don't like an unlevel playing field, but life can't be fair. And I loved what you said, Brian, about not all lots are equal. We can't, act as though they are. But I do think we're moving in the right direction. The people that came up with this committee, y'all keep going because you did real good on the houses and the lot size. Y'all keep going on this tree thing next time.
You're done. Okay, you're done.
Yeah, I think we can. So I think we can come back with some data that I think would be helpful for some folks, and then I think we can have some targeted philosophical discussions about a few things in terms of, hey, how do we deal with what seems to be inequitable, and then kind of move forward in fairly good order. But good comments and tough ordinance, and again, y'all often think of things that we hadn't thought of yet in application. So
thank you, Mr. James.
Okay,
appreciate it. All right. We'll go down to, we have a closed session. We have 2 items on the closed session. Item number 12, the City Council will meet in closed session under Section 551.087 of the Texas Governmental Code, deliberation regarding economic development negotiations, closed meeting. The governmental body is now required to conduct an open meeting, 1, to discuss or deliberate regarding commercial or financial information that the governmental body has received from a business prospect, that the governmental body seeks to have locate, stay, or expand in or near the territory of the governmental body, and with which the governmental body is conducting economic development negotiations. Or number 2, to deliberate an offer of financial or other incentive to a business prospect. This is for Project E074 and Project E080. And also, item number 13, the City Council will meet in closed session under Section 551.071 of the Texas Governmental Code, consultation with an attorney regarding contract negotiations with the Schertz Local Government Corporation. The time is now 8:25. We will reconvene after our discussion. The time is now 10:01. We reconvene into our regular session after our discussion and deliberation regarding our closed session. Just to point out that we went over item number 13, the contract negotiations regarding SSLGC. Start time was 8:27 and end time was 9:29. Then we addressed item number 12, and that start time was 9:41 and the end time was 9:54 in reference to the economic development projects E074 and E080. There's no action that needs to be taken, therefore no roll call confirmation required. So we'll move on. Item number 14 is the quarterly financial reports. Item number 15 is the information on the 2022 master calendar and boards and commissions. And item number 16 is our monthly updates on our major projects in progress. These are information packets provided to council and are available for public viewing at our home site, Schertz.com. With that, we'll just continue with requests and announcements by our city manager, Dr. Brown.
Nothing further, Mayor.
Okay. Council, any possible updates you requesting from staff? Council, is there any items you'd like to put on the future agenda? Okay. Okay, announcements by our council members. Mayor Pro Tem Dalla.
Just some events I attended. Started off with the tree lighting ceremony last week. Then did the parade on Saturday. And then attended the ribbon cutting for the Hot Works yoga. And then just before our council meeting, the opening of our new repair shop facility.
All right. Councilmember Davis.
Yeah, just attended both the tree lighting and the parade. Kudos to the city staff for excellent events and the ribbon cutting at the new maintenance facility today. That's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Scott.
Yes, I attended the tree lighting ceremony. It was very charming. Good job, staff.
Councilmember Whitaker.
I attended the tree lighting ceremony, the Christmas parade. My family enjoyed being part of that this year. And the 12th Flying Training Wing Community and Senior Leaders Holiday Social. So it was really nice to meet with them on a social basis for the holidays. And then today's Fleet Service and Sign Shop grand opening. Amazing facility and impressive on budget and on time. Good job.
Councilmember Hayward.
Yes, I attended a ribbon cutting for Community First Health in Community First Health, and then the ribbon cutting for Hot Works. They're open 24 hours if you want to exercise. I attended the chamber luncheon, then the TMRS Benefit Design Advisory Board up in Austin, and they had their grand opening for their new building. They have a new location called The Grove. It's absolutely amazing, lots of windows, so no one feels claustrophobic in the building. I attended the Public Investment Act training down in San Antonio. A lot of information coming at you. The tree lighting ceremony, Holodazzle, and the 12th Flying Wing Christmas social, and that is all.
Okay. Councilmember Scagliola.
Yeah, chamber luncheon, tree lighting, parade, our facility over there. It's, hey, all in all, it's a wonderful time of the year. Thank you.
Councilmember Brown.
About the same as everybody else. Tree lighting, parade, Building 27, all good stuff. Thank you. And Parks Department, great job.
Okay. The time is now 10:06. We stand adjourned.